And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple. Coming to us from the wonderful world of Mountain Time, and the lead man behind the Free5e initiative, the one and only Dale Critchley. How you doing today, man?
Doing all right. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, if I wanted to be pedantic, I would have said tonight, but point still stands.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, technically correct. The best kind of correct. So, a bit of a tradition around here is opening with the humble beginnings, in a sense. The origin story. Depending on who you ask, the villain origin story. I mean, we are GMs. There's a bit of masochism in all of us. So, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Well, I started it was about 1982. I was at Boy Scout camp, and one of the guys there said, "Hey, who wants to play Dungeons and Dragons?" And said, "Sounds fun." I'd heard of it, and always been a fan of mythology and stuff, fantasy creatures and things like that. So I mean, I was kind of eager to play it, and I don't remember much about that night except everybody wanted to play a fighter. And but then, kind of after we got back to Civilization, it was like, well, hey, who wants to play? And we went over to his house, and I remember we went through Tomb of Horrors, which is really not a good.
You went through Tomb of Horrors as your sophomore experience. What the hell?
Yeah, and I mean the first one we didn't really do a whole lot. When we were at camp, we didn't have a lot of time. So, yeah, I mean, I remember bits and pieces of it, but I was just like, this is fantastic. I love this. And
question.
And so,
do you remember wiping?
Yeah, I remember. I remember the Sphere of Annihilation. That it ate up my 10-foot pole, and I remember the gargoyle with the hands, where you put the sapphires in the hands and it smashed them, and it said, "Your sacrifice was not in vain. Look to the fourth your sacrifice was not in vain. Look to the fourth to see your gain." I still remember that little rhyme, and like that's about it. That's about all I remember.
Do you know why that module is so infamously hard?
Oh yeah, it was Gary Gygax created it. Basically, he was mad at somebody.
It was more that his playtesters at the time were saying that the modules he was putting them through were too easy, which famous last words. And I guess his mindset was, okay, you want something hard, I'll give you something. I'll give you that, but you're not gonna like it.
But yeah, then I mean, I couldn't afford the books, and so I'd get together with my friends, and we would just have like a piece of paper, like lined paper, not graph paper, because graph paper was more expensive, and and we just kind of like make it up as we went along. Like say that like every monster was a quantum ogre, because like you could say, well, I'm gonna go left, I'm gonna go right. It didn't matter, and so it was just like you're just like drawing random hallways on a piece of paper and stuff, and
so journaling RPG is about 20 years ahead of their time.
Yeah, pretty much. We would. This was in like sixth grade, and so like we had an indoor recess. We would just kind of gather around a desk, and somebody would grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and we'd have some 6-sided dice from like an old Monopoly set or something, and and just kind of wing it. But this was Satanic Panic, and we were told, yeah, you guys can't keep playing that. We just think it's not a good idea. We're just like, what? And so, they're over there, they're playing poker. So if we just say we're playing craps here with these dice, is that okay then? And just kind of telling stories? No. So,
yeah, I remember hearing stories about how TSR had a Bible scholar on standby at conventions for years, because of that whole thing, along with some of the more ridiculous claims that were made around that time, like that one guy who claimed that he was a Alexandrian tradition witch high priest. For the record, there is no such thing. And claimed that he was contacted by representatives from TSR to make sure the rituals were authentic. Which...
yeah, that's great, since there's no actual rituals listed.
Yeah. And here's the kicker, though. He made this claim in 1979. D&D had already been out for a few years. Only AD&D had just come out around that time.
Mm-hmm.
He was he was treated as this winning source, but he was also, put it nicely, a few eggs short of a picnic, because he also claimed to be an ex-vampire, along a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Like there was
attention.
Like if that's one of your best arguments to the whole they actually did contact these occultists and Satanists to ensure that, it's like get some better resources than actual crazy people.
Man, if I could, so much as cast a light spell, it would have been pretty cool, but
I think one of the weirder ones was the rumor that got started back because of that whole Monsters and Mazes thing, that people were playing D&D games in steam tunnels and the like. I don't know about you, but I'd rather play a game in a nice, well lit game with a decent amount of AC than be sweating half of my body weight off in a steam tunnel.
Yeah, it's people love to blame things.
Yeah, and for me it's a case of, well, if they're gonna do that, then I think I'm well within my rights to make the claim look ridiculous. Well, mostly because, as Mark Twain had said, against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. Well, he's attributed with saying that. Whether or not he actually said it is up for debate. But given that it sounds like you had dove in. I'm guessing around the time 2nd edition was a thing.
It was still first, and it was then 2nd edition came out when I was in high school, and by that point we had moved and found another guy that was big into it, and like he had all the books, and when the 2nd edition came out, he got the books and that, and after that we kind of played like a hybrid of 1st and 2nd edition because they were so close to each other. And during that time we'd play a lot of D&D, but he had other games too, so we'd play Top Secret, was one that we played a bit, and the one we played the most besides D&D was the old Marvel superheroes game.
Marvel Phase Rip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that game. I still love that game.
Yeah, are you
It's so
familiar with
simple.
the classic Marvel Forever site? Because they're still doing
Hmm.
support stuff for Marvel Phase Rip as recently as, well, now.
Yeah. Well, they're producing really cool stuff too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I follow that. It's a fantastic game. I mean, it's got its problems, but it's one of the easiest pick up and play games. In fact, when I was in college, um, my my dad he's like, first of all, he's I would on the weekends I'd hang out with student union, and
Mhm.
we had there was a RPG group there called RUSAP, the Royal Order of Strange Acting People, and and I mean, like, we'd play all weekend, um but if I was during breaks and stuff where I'd be staying by my dad, who worked for the university, instead of in my dorm or apartment, and and he'd see someone pick me up, and it was like some alumnus that was like 40 years old, and he's like, "Why are you not hanging out with like people your own age?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, it's a mix, but of different people in the group, but most of the people my age spend the weekends drunk and sleeping with strangers, and I mean, would you rather I was doing that?" And my stepmom goes, "He's got a point." And so he's like, you know, there's all this controversy and stuff. You know, could you just like run us through a game so that we can see what it is? And I'm like, yes. And but it was like we didn't have a lot of time, and rolling up characters in D&D take a while and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, so we're gonna play Marvel, and just it's basically the same thing. The mechanics are a little different and stuff, but it's basically the same, except for instead of comic book stuff, picture Lord of the Rings. And so, like, I ran him through a very short kind of one shot thing, and that I whipped together on the fly, and I got all done, and he said, "That's it?" I said, "I mean, yeah, except for like fantasy with wizards and knights and stuff like that, and dragons and monsters." And he's like, "What's wrong with that?" I said, "Nothing. That's what I've been saying this whole time."
Yeah, I'd imagine it was a very egg on face kind of moment.
I mean, my dad, he wasn't, he was always kind of like, I don't know if I don't really have an opinion, and stuff. But my mom had heard a lot of the, um, just all the propaganda and claims and stuff, and
Mhm.
she was real worried, and like she never stopped me from playing, but like there was always this concern,
Yeah.
and so, but after that, it was just kind of like, there's nothing wrong with this. You just
Mhm.
sitting around telling stories and rolling dice.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I could make the joke of maybe somebody in that group was playing TSR Indiana Jones, but let's be honest, nobody did. Uh, in fact, Marvel Phase Rip almost fell into the same problem because the original core book of that did not have any character creation because it assumed that people would want to play as the cast from the various Marvel comics,
Hmm.
which they quickly learned their lesson from that because if they had stuck to that, that would have probably killed the game dead. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we started with the advanced set.
mhm. That
Um,
was
you know,
what had the rule set proper. The basic game, which I think there was about a 1 year gap between the two, uh, didn't have it. It just had the core rules and a bunch of pre-gens essentially.
hmm.
And the reason why I compare that to with like TSR Indiana Jones is because that one didn't learn that lesson. And TSR Indiana Jones got roasted over an open flame critically at the time for that exact reason, because it assumed people would just want to play as the characters from the movies.
Yeah. It was so rare when we played Marvel that we actually use comic book characters. Every once in a while we do like a who would win kind of thing, and it was just like we just set up a battle royal of characters and like put teams against each other and see what happened. But I mean, that was about the just once in a while you might grab a villain or something like that to fight against, but
yeah,
otherwise.
The analogy I like using is nobody wants to play as the X-Men, but they want to play as a student who happens to be in the Xavier Academy.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I'd like to say designers nowadays have learned their lesson, but there's been a few face plants in recent years. Chief among one of the bigger ones being the Power Rangers RPG from a few years ago, which I've talked about extensively on this channel. But given that, I would like to play a little bit of lightning round with a few classics, and you can tell me if it's something you had played, if you had any stories about it. Think of it as the nerdiest Rorschach test you will ever take.
Go for it.
Just without the ink blots, because I'm not that good of an artist. Yes, I know the joke. But Star Frontiers.
Yes. Yeah, the original what do you call them? I can't remember what they're called now.
Percentile dice?
No, I'm thinking with the character race, the ape-like things that WotC got into trouble for recently.
Yeah, which is odd because that race was a Star Frontiers thing, not a. They got in trouble, and that was why when it was put in Spelljammer, which was weird because it was never in Spelljammer from what I remember.
Right.
So,
but yeah, I think we played. I created a character, and it was one of those things. I still have the character sheet somewhere and the sketch that I made of it. But I honestly, I'm not sure if we actually played it. It wasn't for very long. It was like maybe one night.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Traveler.
Yes. And I get those two mixed up too. Yeah, I had a character in Traveler, and in fact, that was actually my first character that I ever played that had a disability. I created a guy that he had this kind of like, it was kind of like Geordi in Star Trek, but just like over one eye. And that one was interesting just because it was so focused on like navigation and stuff. There's a lot of kind of star charts and all. That's kind of what I remember from it.
Yeah, there very much was, because Mark Miller, I think, has an engineering background, but like a lot of people with an engineering background, he kind of got lost in the weeds, because there was a lot of technical stuff within that, and then later on with Traveler 5 that is certainly interesting to have, but how often that's going to actually get used is another matter entirely.
Yep.
Because when he came back with Traveler 5, I ended up covering that, and that book set ended up committing one of the cardinal sins for me when it comes to RPG books, which is not having an index. When you're dealing with 3 books that are about 300 pages each, and you don't have an index, that I feel like that should be punishable by public flogging.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I will admit that might be lingering trauma from all those years of Rifts playing a factor into that.
Mm.
Speaking of
I
which,
love the Palladium system.
yeah, speaking of which, any of the Palladium Megaverse systems, I'll put as the next one for this little experiment.
So I played Rifts like maybe 2-3 times, but like I've got most of the Ninja Turtles books, Ninjas and Super Spies, the Palladium Modern Weapon and Ancient Weapons books. Those are fantastic, and yeah, I love those. I mean, like I'm nerdy enough to have sat down and just read them.
Yeah.
Um, and um, yeah, and then you just kind of brought all that stuff together.
Mhm.
And I love it. And my favorite thing about the Palladium system is their alignment system. And I loved how, because I've never been a fan of like neutral. But in Palladium it's not neutral, it's selfish. And there's different kinds of selfish, and then you also have the aberrant evil that's like your anti-hero. And I really appreciate it because like there's all the arguments about, oh, it's lawful and chaotic and all that kind of stuff, and which is really kind of goes back to Gary Gygax's love of sword and sorcery kind of stuff, Conan and things like that.
I have my own theory when it comes to the alignment system and what it ended up becoming.
Yeah.
I don't think it was drawing upon Conan per se. I think it was drawing upon Michael Moorcock.
Well, yeah.
Specifically the Elric saga, because
Sure.
I think originally it gives me the vibe of it was about how the cosmic forces felt about you, but at some point that I can't say when this happened, but at some point it turned into a morality system, and it was never really built for that.
Mm-hmm.
So round peg, square hole kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's been broken ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've always like, if you're gonna have an alignment system, like make it make sense. And so that was what I really liked about Palladium. And I enjoy building characters too. I built so many characters. For the Ninja Turtles game, I built a ton of characters, and all of them had puns for names. Or else were named after like famous people like Michael J. Fox or something like that.
Let me guess, you had a Michael J. Fox who was literally a fox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Samantha Fox, because it was the 80s.
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, there's plenty of stuff to like within Palladium Megaverse. So I just have a love-hate relationship with how it was organized, because of that infamous 2-column format and all of the errors that were largely caused by Simbeta doing last-minute edits and insisting on doing manual editing when everybody else in the industry had moved to digital.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Ultimate Edition from a few years ago was still manually edited. I know why. It's because he owns his own printing press, but that's a cold comfort when I'm looking for a specific rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's why navigation is one of those things I'm very, very big on.
Yeah, but I didn't play Rifts very much because at the time when Rifts was really big, I was playing Shadowrun.
Mm-hmm. So did you have 4 or 5 pounds of D6s in Shadowrun?
I had an orc mercenary named Monster, and he became so iconic that everybody in this whole group just called me Monster. And he had, because you could like specialize, he had like 27 dice in combat axe. and and also our GM or whatever you call it in Shadowrun, I can't remember.
I usually just go by GM as a general rule because I'm not paid by the syllable.
Yeah, right. But he liked to adapt D&D stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
And so like at one point I had a pet displacer beast, and there was also had boots of striding and springing. So if you can imagine like this big orc kind of bouncing around. There was one time we were trying to get into somewhere and had a grenade and like jumped and landed right in front of this guard, and just like handed him a live grenade and said, "Here, hold this," and then bounced away. But yeah.
Oh, whenever I've done Shadowrun or similar games where there's a high tech level, I have a habit of giving my players very overpowered but very unsafe equipment. You know, equipment where it's as much a danger to them as it is to the enemy. One of my early examples was giving one of the gunmen a legally distinct version of the noisy cricket from Men in Black. Which operate exactly how that gun did in the movie. You know, does a hell of a lot of damage, but every time you fire the thing, you get sent flying.
Shadowrun's actually where we got our my company name from, Wormworks, because I had a megacorp in there that was run by a dragon, and
well, that's a terrifying prospect.
It was just like it was a dragon with a lot of cyberware.
Yeah, though at the same time, I'm trying to envision board meetings of that corp with the dragon, and everybody having to, and you know, if you can't give an adequate explanation why your TPS reports aren't filed properly, then you might become very crunchy. Because remember, never cut a deal with a dragon, for you are crunchy and taste good with ketchup.
Yep. I have that on a t-shirt.
When Legend of the Secret came along, I rejiggered that as never cut a deal with a wizard because you are highly flammable. I swear to God, characters in that TV show had red gasoline instead of blood because they get hit with a fireball and then they go off like a grenade. But shifting back to the Rorschach test. What about Alternity?
Nope, I haven't played that one.
And that one gets tossed around, especially in a lot of the early days. Boot Hill.
Trying to think. I don't think so. I mean, like I was familiar with it because it was kind of one of the, TSR's other projects at the time, and there wasn't a whole lot else. But I was never really into cowboy stuff, and so I think I might have played it once. But
Gamma World.
Sure. That's another one that I think I've played like once or twice.
I've played a few times. It became a reliable beer and pretzels game just because of the crazy ass combinations you can come up with. I think one of the times I was playing a sentient flower who was wielding a refrigerator on a stick. And that was mostly because I had just come back from the state fair, and the meme with the state fair in my state is any kind of food that exists can be found there on a stick.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's standard with every state fair, but it became such a meme with mine that they actually added it to the advertising, so they were well in on the joke.
Love it.
But were you familiar at all with any of these Star Wars or Star Trek RPGs that have come out over the years?
Familiar with them, but never played them. So it's one of those things that I really like to. I've heard really good things about Star Trek's 2D20 system.
Mm-hmm.
But I've just never had a chance to play it.
Yeah.
So, and I've always been more of a Star Wars than a Star Trek guy. I like them both, but Star Wars is definitely my jam. And but yeah, I've never had a chance to play that. I've got a very good friend that spends a lot of time playing X-Wing, and he's talked to me a lot about it, but I've never actually had a chance to play it.
So you never tried out like Star Wars D6 back in the day?
Nope.
Which is that is interesting, though depending on where you are, that one could be a bit tricky to get at the time. Nowadays, it's reincarnation in D6 space. You can get basically for free, but
yeah.
Shifting into that. Now, I know that with Free5e, part of the initiative is it being fully free to own. Was this something that you'd always planned on doing, or was it spurred on by what happened a couple years ago with the whole OGL fiasco?
But honestly, what it started with after running a couple of other Kickstarters, just because we do a lot with with disability representation and things like that. We have a lot of fans that are on very limited incomes, and I get notes from people our Patreon. We have a lot of people kind of come on and off. Depends if they can afford the $5 a month, or $2 a month even. And I had people that said, "Hey, I really want to support your campaign, but I get my SSDI check 2 days after the end of it. Is there any way that I can still kind of late pledge or something like that?" And and we're talking $5, $10, $15 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but I've been there. I know what that's like, to where you're counting every penny, and it's just kind of well, I'd really like to put $5 toward this, but then I'd have to skip a couple meals, and so so I was kind of thinking about what are ways that can help out people that are on extremely limited budgets. And then just the sort of political cycle. I could see that there's a pretty decent chance, based on the previous actions, that things were not going to get better for people that were dependent on that kind of assistance. And I thought, here's the thing. I mean, people can be so isolated, just because of whether it's buildings that are inaccessible or groups that are inaccessible, because they just don't want to kind of adjust what they're doing for somebody new, or somebody that might not be able to get into a certain area, or might need a little extra time to to read through the character sheet, or things like that. And so I wanted to give people the chance to at least to be able to afford the books.
Mm-hmm.
And so that they could either be able to have a book where they could walk into a local game store, or a library or something like that, a community D&D group, and and sit down and play with them and feel like they feel good about kind of what they're bringing to the table, and ultimately to be able to have a set of core books that are affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, where it started from. Okay, how did I do that? And so, first of all, because WotC put the SRD into Creative Commons, okay, well, this is a pretty good place to start. And because the goal was to use Creative Commons content and not have to, because paying writers costs a lot of money, and I didn't want to have to reinvent the wheel myself. And I was trying to find a way to make it as affordable as possible. And so then I started talking about it. Mike Shea is a good friend of mine, and he's put a whole ton of his stuff out in Creative Commons. And I said, Mike, you probably have just in what you've released, that's probably most of what you'd need for the equivalent of a Dungeon Master's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started kind of talking about the idea, and he's like, "This is fantastic! I love this." And I thought, okay, well, so that covers most of that. The SRD covers from WotC covers the most of the player's handbook and the monster manual, and then I started looking at what A5e has, and realized that their spell descriptions are shorter than the WotC ones. If you take the kind of extra stuff out that they added for A5e, because they made the spell description shorter so that they can could squeeze in the extra stuff and not multiply the page count.
Yeah.
And I looked at their monsters. I'm like, these are fantastic, and I know Paul a little bit too, and bounced some ideas off of him and about balance and stuff like that, and then looked at the Forge of Foes stuff that had been released, and then okay, well, so I just need some more character classes. And Kibbles Tacey's a friend of mine, and
I've had Kibbles on before.
And so he's like, pretty much all of his stuff is Creative Commons. And I said, hey, how would you feel about me using some of your stuff? And he's like, well, let me send you my 2 PDFs of my 2 books. Feel free to use anything from there. If you need stuff in a particular format or whatever, just let me know. I'm happy to help out, whatever I can do. And kind of pointed me to, he said, oh, this one is probably better for beginning players and stuff like that. And so yeah, he was just fantastic. And so yeah, everybody was just kind of just really excited about it. Then when I started kind of putting it together and figuring out, like, okay, how am I gonna, it's like, here's all this stuff, how do I organize this, how do I start trimming things and stuff, and figure out what needs to be in there, what doesn't, and stuff like that. And then PJ Coffee from people may know him from the Ian World podcast, and they've created some really cool stuff with character development and stuff too. And they said, do you want some help putting this together? And I said, yeah. And so we started kind of bouncing ideas around, and I contacted Chris Hopper to do the layout and I wanted Chris because he's like, if you talk accessibility and stuff like that, like he's your guy. And I told him about the project, and he was just thrilled to be a part of it. And so yeah, then we just the next question was, okay, so if we're giving this away, how do we fund it? Because this is going to be expensive still, even without having to pay for a lot of. We're still doing some writing to flesh things out and change things to make it the way we want it and stuff. So like, okay, how do we pay for this? Well, my wife and I also do like kind of different kinds of crafting kinds of things in a sense of like I've got next to me just around me I've got a 3D printer, a 40 watt CO2 laser, a heat press, and a couple of cutting machines and things like that, and so and plus she makes jewelry and just all kinds of stuff, and so he said, well, maybe we could create the kinds of things that you see in a lot of Kickstarters at the higher levels, make them a little more affordable, and do create the custom stuff here, which would be a lot cheaper than having to produce things somewhere else, and that we could have higher profits and be able to put that money toward it to make it happen, and actually pull it off. And so we started pricing things and figuring out, okay, what could we make that would be really cool kind of stuff, that could be tools for players and GMs, and just kind of cool mementos and things like that. And so we kind of put things together and figured it all out, and made up some prototypes and that, and said, yeah, this is gonna work.
And what obviously accessibility is one thing, but for me, as I kind of hinted at, one of my big hangups and I will die on this hill kind of scenario is navigation. Like I give a little bit of leeway if I'm dealing with a zine. Like I'm not gonna give a zine guff for not having an index, because, well, it's a zine. They're not going to reach the triple digits in page count, barely even the double digits in page count. Yep. But when you're dealing with full books, if you don't have an index, or you don't have bookmarks, or even hyperlinks in some cases, that's always a red flag.
Yeah.
Because when you probably recall, like in 3rd edition, having to look up specifically what you need to do in order to do grappling. And just fumbling around with a bunch of pages because it wasn't specifically in there.
So I actually, after 2nd edition, went off to, I was playing that through college, and then I got married, went to grad school, and had kids and things, and for the most part stopped playing role-playing games altogether for about 25 years.
Even so, I think you get what I mean by that kind of needing to look up one specific rule.
Mm-hmm. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I just don't have. I played 3.5 once at a game store, and hated it, but to each their own. But yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying about navigation. And that was another reason that I really wanted Chris for this. I mean, because he's, besides being fantastic with accessibility, he's one of the best layout people in the business. And in fact, when I contacted him, he said, "What's your time frame? Because I'm doing layout for Draw Steel right now.
Mhm.
And so I mean, like, he's fantastic, and I knew that he would not only do things like having indexes, but have the documents indexable, searchable, easy to navigate depending what kind of navigation needs you have, screen readers and things like that, to make it really easy for everybody to use it and be able to kind of export that in different formats and things like that, so that whatever people need, they can find it in the way that they need it.
Yeah. One of the things you brought up in the Kickstarter page is the idea of spell templates as something that's going to be in the player's guide. Could you expand on that and what that is going to be doing?
Yeah. So the big bad evil guy of this whole project is page count. We are trying to keep the page count as low as possible, so that, because we're going to make the books available at cost, and or roughly at cost anyway, and so we wanted to make them super affordable. Well, and so, like, we said, okay, well, we're gonna use black and white art. That makes the book cheaper to print, and we want to. And while we're trying to keep the page count down, I didn't want it to be, I said, I didn't want it to be Temu 5e, this sort of like inferior, junk. Like, I want people to be able to be proud of it. I want to be proud of it.
Wish.com 5e.
Yeah, So I was like, okay, so how do we keep the page count down, but have, like, maximize the value of it? Oh, and also, because we want to make it accessible, we're using larger fonts and bigger margins and things like that, for people with low vision, people with dyslexia, and things like that. And so like, okay, how do we do this? And so when I was looking at the A5e monsters, like, they do a fantastic job with templates for the monsters. And I mean, like, WotC's had one, the half dragon, and kind of the shadow dragon, but that was it. And so then, but like, A5e has a whole bunch, and I was like, oh, these are so cool, and being able to apply them just multiplies the number of monsters that you have. And then we figured out, because we separated races from sub-races, and ancestries and cultures, you could even, like, apply these cultures to like a sentient monster, and modify them that way. And see, like, you could have a werewolf that was raised in the high elf culture, and is a trained assassin using the because all the sort of NPCs, A5e says, okay, well, NPCs, you can adjust the NPCs by changing their ancestry and stuff, right? But I thought, but these NPCs, really, the NPCs are really more like roles. They're like careers, jobs, whatever, that kind of thing, guards and assassins and things like that. And I thought, okay, well, could you apply that to a monster too? And I realized, really all you got to do is look at, if you look at the stats and you want to modify the monster stats based on the role, you just kind of see, where is it different from 10? Because, like, 10's your base thing. And so, if the assassin has a dex of 16, add 6 to the dex. And I mean, I'm sure it's not a perfect system and people could abuse it, but it kind of gives you, and then you could just lump those skills in and things like that, and all of a sudden you've got a high elf werewolf assassin, or however you want to apply it. And so by taking these things and being able to apply them in different ways, you just multiply the number of monsters that you have because of the different flavor and the different abilities and things. And then there's this whole section from Forge of Foes that's in Creative Commons that's about like adding additional features, templates, things like that, and so that you can add spellcasting to your dragons. Which, I mean, why wouldn't you? You can add like elemental things. And I really want to make a dire Tarask.
Why? As if a Tarask isn't bad enough as it is, you want to make it worse?
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
I mean, on one hand, the GM side of me is like, yeah, that would be fun. The player side of me is going, oh, fuck off. But I can't. The only reason I can't be mad at it is because I know that given the circumstance, I probably would have done the same, if not worse, given some of the punishment games that I put my players through if I catch them cheating. Or I think in one case somebody wagered that they'd be able to crit on it, and I said if you do anything but a crit, you have to do the punishment game. Are you still willing to do this? He ended up rolling a 1, so I'm like, all right. Now you have to do the punishment game, and the punishment was you have to drink a bottle of bacon soda. Because I'll use either that or what's known as the pain glass, which is a shot glass filled with water, salt, sea salt, pepper, black pepper, about 3 different hot sauces, and 1 drop of the bomb. Or just a random bottle that I got off of the Hot Ones list. Because it is a shot glass meant to inflict pain. And it's usually there as a... I don't use it all that often. It's there as a... make the punishment so much worse than the crime that nobody is willing to hedge their bets on that. So I've only used it in the last decade, maybe 4 times. Because somebody in
remember my first module was Tomb of Horrors, so
yeah. Yeah, but there's always somebody who slams the thing down in one go and then goes, "Oh, that wasn't that hot," and I'm just like, yes. Let's see if you still have that energy in about 20 minutes.
Yep. Wait for it.
You got to go to the bathroom eventually, and and when you're dealing with that kind of spicy, you know how it goes.
Yeah. So, with templates, then, I said, well, this works so well. Can we do this with other things? And I looked at, we only have 2 subclasses for each character class, because subclasses take up a ton of pages. And so I was trying to find, like, okay, how can we expand this? How can we put more value into this? And I was looking at the wizard, and said, like your kind of basic wizard subclasses are all based on the schools of magic. Is there a way that you could like do a template version of that where it's not exactly the same thing, but where you kind of have your sort of core school of magic class, and then you just like apply different schools to it. And I played around with that for a few days, and then I realized that in the A5e SRD they already did that. And I looked at it, said this will work. This doesn't have a lot of kind of extra stuff in it. It was really easy to adapt. I'm like, let's do that. All right, cool. We just added like 8 subclasses to the wizard by using this one instead. And I said, I wonder if you could do that with the cleric, because your kind of core cleric subclasses are just based on the sort of standard domains. And we're still working on that, but the plan is to do kind of the same thing with that, to give a lot more variety. And I haven't looked at the rest yet to see if if there's ways to do that to augment things or something. But
See that
kind
being
of
done with the warlock, with the martial classes. That's where it might get a little bit tricky.
right, yeah, their mechanics, yeah, they're just different.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to do with the warlock, and I just haven't figured that one out yet. But it's still definitely a work in progress. So we'll see what we can do. But yeah, we're trying to get as much value out of every word, every page as possible. While still keeping it easy to read and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're also planning on doing that with spells.
Mm-hmm.
And magic items, so that you kind of take your basic ones and then you slap some extra stuff onto it, and it makes it more interesting, and you have a whole new spell, and it's different from it's the spell itself is modified, not how you cast it like a sorcerer. And it's important distinction there that that the caster, we're not kind of stepping on the sorcerer. They still have all their meta magic and stuff, and that's distinct. But this just increases the number of available spells to choose from by a multiplier.
And would it be fair of me also to say that a lot of these spells that are similar except for this one thing ended up getting parsed, like a lot of the stuff like protection from or the variations on cure wounds get parsed to kind of cut down on that page count?
Actually, most of that stuff, A5e to save words, they trim those down enough that because like the protection spells, depending what it's protecting you from, really affects the power level of it, and things, and there's kind of slight variations, but there's what is it? Some of the summoning spells are, I was looking at them. It was like 500 words for this summoning spell, and then I can't remember now, and so like, don't people listening to this don't go, oh no, you got the wrong spell, because I probably do. But it'd be like summon Fae, summon demon, and stuff. It's like the exact same spell, and all they did is change the word of like what you're summoning, and it was like, really, do we really need 1,500 words for 3 spells when 500 would do, and for the first one, and then just the other ones, you basically say it's like that but with demons. But then I looked at what A5e does, and they actually distilled it down and made it much simpler, and it's like, oh, this works. They did it right. So yeah, most of that. The problem is you change the wording too much, you start mucking with the mechanics, and you can have unintended consequences. So we're being real careful about that. Yeah. But it's more kind of like, think about like the difference between lightning bolt and chain lightning. Now imagine doing that with that kind of chain effect, with other spells.
Yeah. I've seen some attempted with a kind of build and effect approach. I remember that there was a book in Pathfinder that did it, and also there's been the Sphere system by Drop Dead, which operates on more of a talent system rather than a defined spell list. But speaking of that, in the name of kind of adding that value, there is one thing that that 5e has gotten a lot of criticism for lacking in, and I'm curious if this is something you're considering putting in, if not the player's handbook, then maybe the DM's guide, and that is item creation.
Yeah, here's the problem with crafting systems. No one's actually created a perfect one. They all have flaws that can be abused. Um, trying to, I know we went around and around with that one, and I think, I honestly, I'd have to go back and double check this, um, because we kind of went so many different thoughts. But I think that we kind of settled on a simplified version of um of like whatever's in the 2014. I mean, it's like there's not much to it. Yeah, crafting's just it's kind of a mess. Um, and it's really hard and and I don't want to break the whole game trying to figure that one out because people a lot smarter than me haven't been able to. So
I know Kibbles has his own crafting setup in at least one of his books. I can't remember which one it was because I ended up grabbing them around the same time. So they both exist in kind of this continuum.
Mm-hmm.
Same with a lot of the stuff that Mage Hand puts out, which they put out some really good stuff. It's just I grabbed a lot of it in a batch, so there's difficulty parsing which is which.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that, and yeah, it was just kind of something that ultimately kind of went, you know what? I think this is something that we can save some word count on by having little or nothing on it, and just kind of saying, look, if you really want to do that, there's lots of systems out there. Find the one you like.
Yeah, I think that whole we left it blank so that people could come up with it ended up creating more problems than it solved.
Right.
I think if they had put in a crafting system, even if it was half-assed and sucked, at least there you'd have a baseline, as opposed to the current spot that we're in, where since there isn't a baseline that people can kind of build off of, crafting systems by different third-party developers go all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, if you want to do a crafting thing, then and this is kind of what A5e does is like do a quest. Okay, well, here's the ingredients you need, and it's like, it's like rod of 7 parts or something. It's like you have to go to all these different places and find battle creatures to get their toenails or something, and and so yeah, it requires a whole quest. And if you do a whole quest, so that you can have that particular kind of item or whatever, you've earned it. But just like, whoa, we're just gonna spend a year of downtime and and create and build these things. I know that we did, because there's this whole question about where it gets even more complicated is with help. Like, oh well, it's like based on the weight of something or something like that, and so it's like, okay, so if you're doing a suit of chainmail and you have there's no limits on the amount of help you could do. So okay, well, if you have 1,000 people and each one does one ring of the chainmail, and like you could do it in a day, and so it doesn't make any sense, and so yeah, I can't even remember how we finally settled off the top of my head in that, but I think we kind of minimized it as much as we could.
I distinctly recall in my case going a more abstract approach, because I felt trying to put some sort of essentially real world physics into these sort of mechanics was going to create more problems than it was really worth. And I've always had the mindset of, if I can do a job in 3 steps, why am I doing it in 5? Uh, because of that, I went with a template that people can interpret rather than trying to find a way to truncate the particulars of how blacksmithing works. But I'm curious if that template thing is also going to be. You kind of hinted at this, but is it also going to be applying to things like magic items?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which...
There'll be ways to augment them, and we'll have as part of those template systems, we're gonna have kind of guidelines on. Okay, well, if you apply this effect, it increases the spell by 1 level or 2 levels, and you know, if you apply this to a magic item, it the rarity of the item changes, and that's kind of some general guidelines for kind of power levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, since we're talking about making it as affordable as possible, this is where one other elephant in the room has kind of come in and crashed on my couch. I really need to get a new couch with all the elephants that keep showing up. Don't know how that keeps happening, but it has to do with providing teaching tools so that the grid combat and miniatures isn't as necessary in some instances. Is that something you plan on addressing?
Good question. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure. Trying to rifle through 1,000 pages in my head without an index.
See?
I know that Mike's GM stuff had some stuff. Oh yeah, we have a section on zone-based combat, and some stuff on theater of the mind and things like that. So that kind of offers some different options instead of kind of being stuck tied to a grid. So yeah, that is in there. I remember now.
Yeah, since you have some people. The tricky thing when it comes to the insistence on grid combat is you've got some people who either due to ability or due to means or just due to the angle that they're approaching role playing want to tackle the combat aspect without having to map out a whole dungeon or map out miniature placements with encounters. I know virtual tabletops are kind of built around that sort of thing, but depending on the campaign, that may not be as feasible.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Which is part of the reason I asked on that, and in a similar vein, it's no secret that there's a fair amount of, for lack of a better word, traps when it comes to character creation. And I am curious if you have plans on putting in a few tips here and there on what to build based on potential concepts.
Good question. I can't think of anything right now. We tried to keep things as balanced as possible, and there's a lot of like backgrounds. We have more just kind of like, we've got the acolyte in there as a sample, but it's more like kind of create your background the way you want it. Which I think was what it was supposed to be anyway. But but then like as soon as they gave some examples, people were like, "Give us more," instead of just going, "Okay, just make your own."
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it on both sides when it comes to that. I think what it really it really comes down to is providing guidelines.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, so we've got kind of like a checklist. It's like, you know, have pick two of these and one of these or whatever, and so it's just like you just sort of like go shopping for the features of your background, and then you kind of flesh it out with some story stuff, and so it just kind of like walks you through creating the background the way you want it, and and so so it's kind of like that, where so it doesn't say like kind of here's how to optimize your character, but there's just enough flexibility in building it. I mean that like, and I mean I'm sure that if you choose kind of just the right class and ancestry and culture and background, that you can kind of min-max your character and stuff. And I mean, if you really want to do that, then if that's what's fun for you, do it. If I mean, there's some danger of someone that where you have someone that does that, and then someone else that's like, well, I just I've got this kind of story concept that I want to do, and they create it, and then when you kind of get into a battle or something like that, your min-maxer just kind of hogs the ball, or something, and I mean that can happen, but I think that's something that could be mitigated through conversations or through
I will,
or when the GM is putting the story together, whatever, to kind of consider the different characters and make sure that everybody has a chance to shine, and stuff like that.
I will note that when it comes to this sort of thing, balance is not what wasn't necessarily what I was aiming at, but more dealing with the analysis paralysis issue that can come up, especially when you're dealing with people just coming into the hobby.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hey, there's an advantage of not having as many subclasses. But yeah, I mean, like, it walks you through it, and I don't think we have anything where people are going to feel like, oh, I picked the wrong thing, and now I'm a purple dragon knight, So, I'm hoping that we have enough, the things are kind of even enough that, yeah, I mean, we don't have, like in the player's handbook, it has like, all right, here's your quick build, and choose, do this, and this, and here's your sort of generic warlock or whatever. But I think that the way that it's offered, it's like, okay, well, first, here's your options for classes. Yeah, take a look at them, see which one sounds fun to do. Here's the different ancestries. Here's the and we're kind of working on how to organize that best too. And we've gotten we released the manuscripts, and first we released them to our email announcements list, and as the Google Docs with comment access, and just, I mean, people just went in there and said, what if you did it like this, and things like that, and what if you changed this, and that, and it's been fantastic, just getting all those different perspectives, and I think it really, just the whole Free5e concept of this is a game for the people. It belongs to the people. And so it is also edited by and like built on feedback from the people. And so it's kind of just got that whole grassroots nature and feel to it. Instead of like, oh, here's an unearthed arcana. All right, here's 3 questions to answer, about it or something like that. And I mean, like, I'm not criticizing WotC for the way they do it. I mean, I couldn't imagine processing tens of thousands of feedback forms and stuff like that. So I mean, they're just operating on a completely different scale. But being able to sort of have those conversations about different pieces and stuff, and like, well, I don't think we could do it that way, but that gives me an idea for this. What do you think of that? Oh, like, oh yeah, that sounds good, and stuff. And just being able to have those conversations is just wonderful. I love it. And so yeah, some of that stuff we're kind of still figuring out. I mean, people look at the manuscripts as they are right now. They're a little bit of a mess, and I'm sorry about that. But it's kind of it's just where we're at right now, and we're continuing to work on them and organize them and stuff. Like the stuff's there. It's just okay. There's a bunch of template stuff that we're still putting in, but most of it's there. It just needs to be rearranged, organized. How do we best format these tables so that they're really accessible and and things like that. So it's just kind of dealing with all those kind of questions, and how do we rearrange things so that they make the most sense to the most people.
Which certainly makes sense. And when it comes to the state of things with the current manuscript, the line from my mentor that always comes to mind, and not to put too fine a point in it, but the first thing you do sucks. And that's, I'm not saying that as an insult, but more of there's always going to be a bunch of problems the first time you put something out.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think in the
yeah, we're open about that.
I think in the engineering world, this is referred to as teething troubles. But with that kind of thing in mind, and I do want to give my congrats for you guys getting past your initial goal with about 3 weeks left at the time we're recording this. But with each one, do you have kind of a hard cap as far as what you want as far as the page count? Because I know you said page count is going to be the biggest enemy in the process.
Yeah, it's the total pages for the 3 books is right around 1,000, just over. And one of the things with that is that we moved. We looked at, especially between the GM book and the player's book, we wanted to move as much. The way we looked at it is okay. On the one hand, like the player's book is in and of itself almost a complete game. Because the players need to know what are the rules, and so we kind of kept that in mind, but we also said, all right, if we can cut down, if you're looking at like a group where you've got 5 people that all have a player's book, and there's 1 GM book and 1 monster book. If we can move some stuff from the player's book that the players don't really need into the GM book, then the page count of the player's books go down. And you don't have to multiply the page, if you take out 10 pages, now all of a sudden you're paying for 50 pages less. Well, 45 40, because you're moving those 10 pages into the GM book. And so we really looked hard at that too, sort of what needs to be in the player's book what can go in the GM book the players don't really need, so that if you're buying multiple players books, that it'll be more affordable. And so we took and so yeah, kind of we've got a pretty rough page count. I'd really like to cut it down more, because our goal was to buy one WotC book is about $45 on Amazon. It's about the cheapest place to get it. I encourage people to be willing to go to your friendly local game store and support small businesses instead of Jeff Bezos. But we kind of looked at that as the kind of baseline of how much one book costs, and we said, can we make all 3 books cost the same as one WotC book? And we did, until Drive-Thru-RPG, because their printer Lightning Source raised their prices considerably. For the same book, went from 45 to about 65, or for the same set of 3 books. So we're trying to kind of bring that back down. I don't think we're going to get to 45, and the way that it's just with all the tariff talk and everything like that, especially when, because we've looked at shipping costs and stuff too. And it's just a hard time to be trying to produce cheap things right now. And so that's why we've also said, well, first of all, I did find ways. We have to kind of set the price at what we can produce it on Drive-Thru-RPG, because they have a deal with publishers that they call it like a fair price agreement, where if you want to run sales on other sites and stuff like that, fine. But they kind of expect you that whatever you're going to charge for it on Drive-Thru, that you're going to charge the same on everywhere else. And so we did find a way to do it a little bit cheaper, but to be fair to Drive-Thru, where that price cut is only going to be available to backers. It'll be kind of a limited thing, and then otherwise the price will be the cheapest we can do on Drive-Thru. So, which, I mean, to be fair, they're one of the cheapest printers in the world, and I've checked. So it's actually still a pretty good deal for what you're getting.
Yeah, I can certainly get that, and I'll be looking forward to seeing how the project manifests with time. That's why sometimes I ask for a release window, but I know with this kind of project that's a little bit tricky. But
so our goal, at least, right now, based on the how it's funding, we'll definitely have the player's book, and hopefully we'll fund the GM book. It doesn't look like we're gonna do the monster one unless some kind of amazing miracle happens. And so then what we're gonna do is we're gonna fulfill that, and then we'll pick up from there and run another campaign. Whatever money we have left over, once everything is fulfilled, everything's made, sent out, and everything, that's going to be applied to the second campaign. So we don't want people to feel like, well, it's not going to hit the next goal, so this money's just going to kind of be pocketed or whatever. No, I mean, we're going to apply that to the next campaign to make it easier, because we really want to get these out there. We want to make them available. It's really important to us. And so our goal is whatever we accomplish on this first one, we want to have it available by November, so that it can be people can get like physical copies in time for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of that's the time crunch that we chose to put ourselves under.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if we only need to produce 1 or 2 books instead of 3, I think we should be able to do that. It's just a matter of getting the editing done and meanwhile getting all of the physical rewards done too that we're doing in house. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we've given ourselves enough time to pull that off.
Which, make sure to knock on wood after the show.
Indeed.
Just because.
Yeah.
You should know just as well as anyone how the gods of irony and the RNG gods like to conspire to make people's lives interesting.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, you can look at our other campaigns, and our first one took a lot longer to get it done. The second one took about an extra year before we even were able to launch because of all of the setbacks that we had. So,
You know, it really is a burden being right all the time. But
yeah.
with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Oh, this is fun. I had a blast. I love just love chatting about this stuff. So,
And, of course,
Yep.
a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!